What is up, guys? Senator here, and today we have the definitive top 10 list for the best SMGs in Rainbow Six Siege. So I made an SMG tier list, and I told you guys if that video hit 150 likes, I would make an actual definitive top 10 SMG list. So not just saying this SMG is in this tier or that tier, but an actual Watch Mojo type top 10 list. And that's what we're going to be doing today. You guys hit that mark in like 12 hours, so these challenges are just too easy for you guys. So this time I'm going to give you a challenge that you cannot complete. If this video hits 400 likes, which I'll be pleasantly surprised if it does, I will make a video where I take every single weapon in Rainbow Six Siege and I will rank every single weapon based on their damage per second. That'll be a big video, so it requires a lot of likes, so good luck. This top 10 list will not be based off my opinion like my tier lists are. This top 10 list will be based off the damage per second of all SMGs in Rainbow Six Siege. And damage per second is calculated by taking the fire rate of a weapon and multiplying it by its damage. Once you have that number, you divide it by 60, and that gives you the amount of damage it can dish out in 1 second. So anyways, let's get into it. In the number 10 spot is my absolute favorite SMG in the game, the MX4 Storm. The MX4 Storm runs a damage of 26 with a fire rate of 950 rounds per minute, which is fantastic for a 3-speed roamer like Alibi. The MX4 Storm has a total damage per second of 411.6. The number 9 spot goes out to Ella with her Scorpion. The Scorpion is a weapon that you either absolutely love or you hate it because of its ridiculous spray pattern. It has a very low damage output of 23, but makes up for it by having one of the fastest fire rates of any SMG at 1080. The overall damage per second for the Scorpion is 414. For our number 8 spot, we have the T5 SMG that is available for both Legion and the new operator, Malusi. This is one of my favorite weapons in the game, and so I'm really excited that we're getting a 3-speed defender who can carry this weapon. The damage of the T5 is 28, which is already pretty good when comparing the SMG class. That with the added fire rate of 900 rounds per minute makes this weapon absolutely insane. The damage per second of the T5 SMG is 420. We also have another weapon that ties in at the number 8 spot due to it having the exact same damage per second as the T5 SMG, and this weapon is Kaid's AUG A3. This is an SMG that has a fire rate of 700, which is pretty underwhelming, but it makes up for it by having an insane damage output of 36. The overall damage per second of the AUG 3 is also 420. The 7th SMG on our list is Mozzie's P10 Roni. And when it comes to Mozzie, you'll either swear up and down that his Commando is the best or that his Roni is the best. But for me, I've always preferred the Roni because of its extremely high fire rate of 980 rounds per minute, and it has a damage output of 26, which honestly is surprising when you consider how fast the weapon really is. But the biggest downside of the Roni is its small magazine capacity. It holds 19 plus 1 rounds. The overall damage per second of the Roni is 424. And since we're talking about Mozzie's Commando will not be featured in this list because Ubisoft classifies his Commando as an assault rifle. Even though it shoots 9mm, so technically it should be classified as a submachine gun, but for some reason Ubi doesn't do so, and I'm going by Ubi rules. Number 6 goes to Capkin's 9x19 VSN, and this is just a fantastic weapon that is overlooked by so many. The damage output of the 9x19 is 34, which is insane for an SMG, but its fire rate is at 750, so it balances that out just a little bit. This is a great weapon with high damage for an SMG and a medium fire rate, and basically has no recoil whatsoever. The damage per second of the 9x19 VSN is 425. Now for the number 5 spot, and this just completely surprised me because I forgot how high the damage is on this weapon. I believe it has the highest damage output of any SMG on this list, and this is Frost's 9mm C1, which has a damage output of 45, and that's more than a lot of rifles in this game, but it's balanced out with the slow fire rate of 575. I personally don't really like this weapon because its fire rate is so slow, but regardless of what I think, it does have a damage per second of 431.2. Looking at the number 4 spot, it goes to Vigil's K1A. This is a weird weapon, and a lot of people consider it a rifle and some consider it an SMG, but Ubisoft does consider it as a submachine gun. However, it's understandable as to why you'd think it would be a rifle considering the feel of the weapon and the fact that the K1A shoots a 5.56x45, which is a classified NATO intermediate round. Anyways, the K1A has a damage of 36 and a fire rate of 720. This is another instance where you have to sacrifice fire rate for high damage, but the damage per second of Vigil's K1A is at 432, making it one of the best SMGs in the game. Coming in at number 3, we have another tie, and this is between the PDW that is available to Jackal and the FMG9 that is available to both Knock and Smoke. And I was really surprised when I saw that the FMG was so high, but then I remembered it did get a buff a few months ago, but I honestly had no idea that the DPS increased so much from it. And so that's why if you go look at my tier list video of the SMGs, I did have the FMG9 a little bit lower because I had not yet really looked at how big they buffed it. I more or less just based it on how it felt without really looking at how much they really increased the damage of this weapon. But looking at the PDW9 first, it is an amazing SMG that has a fire rate of 800 and a damage output of 34, which is great. Not to mention, it is a laser beam with an ACOG. Even if it didn't have an ACOG, this would still be one of the best SMGs in the game. As for the FMG9 that I just mentioned, it has the exact same damage of 34 and fire rate of 800, which again I didn't realize because honestly I didn't think the FMG buff was that strong. If you're someone who doesn't play Knock, or you're like most people who play Shotgun and SMG11 with Smoke, this may be a surprise. But both these weapons have a damage per second of 453. And while you could say that the PDW9 is much better considering it has a drum mag and the ability to have an ACOG, you do somewhat have a point, but for an accurate and fair list, I am going off the damage per second of these weapons. Now for the number 2 spot, we have Mira and Goyo's Vector. We know the Vector, we know how strong it is. This thing is just scary fast. It has a fire rate of 1200 rounds per minute, which results in you burning through the magazine in like half a second. With such a high fire rate like this, you know it has to be lacking in the damage department, and you'd be correct. The damage of the Vector is 23. However, this low damage output does nothing to the damage per second considering how ridiculously fast it is. The damage per second of the Vector is 460. Finally, number 1 on our list, the best SMG in Rainbow Six Siege is, honestly no surprise, Bennett's MP7. And I don't really need to tell you guys how great this thing is. You know it, I know it, everyone knows that the MP7 is a god tier gun. It has a damage output of 32, which is pretty solid considering, comparing it to other SMGs. But when you go ahead and add the fire rate of 900 rounds per minute, this results in the MP7 having a damage per second of 480, which is the absolute highest damage per second of any SMG in Rainbow Six Siege. And so that's it. That's the definitive top 10 best SMGs in Rainbow Six Siege. And if you want to see a video where I take every primary and secondary weapon in the game and then make a massive definitive list like this with all the other weapons, get this video to 400 likes. So good luck. So let me know what you think of this list, because there were some things in here that really surprised me when I was trying to find the damage per second of each SMG. A lot of things did surprise me. Some things, I knew that the Bandit MP7 was going to be at the top, but I had no idea that, Frost's SMG would be so high on the list. I didn't think the Vector would be that high considering I knew it had low damage and a high fire rate, but it did seem to equal out. But overall, I think that, we expected this, but it's nice to have a way to, look at SMGs, and this is probably the best way to compare each SMG. And this is probably the most impartial way to judge the SMGs in the game, because you have like one camp who will always want an SMG that has a higher damage and will sacrifice a lower fire rate, or people like me who would prefer a very, very high fire rate gun and sacrifice a little damage. And that's why at my tier list, my SMG tier list, there were a lot of things that, didn't really add up compared to, this tier list that went off damage per second. Like the K1A, for example. It's a solid gun, but for me, it's like a B tier gun compared to maybe Alibi's MX4 Storm, which has a ridiculously high damage. And that kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about Mozzie. You have a camp who prefers the Roni because it's ridiculously fast, and you may sacrifice a little bit in terms of damage and mag capacity, or you have a camp of Mozzie mains who want to play only the Commando because they would rather have a lower fire rate with higher damage with a bigger magazine. And it's completely understandable as to why you'd want, different guns for different roles. And so calculating it by damage per second is the absolute best way to find out which actually is the best gun. It takes best of both worlds, combines them, and you get to look at data that, takes both the damage and fire rate into account. So if you didn't like this list, if your favorite weapon didn't make it into the top 10, it's not my fault this time, it's Ubisoft's fault. This is the top 10 based off of damage per second. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for sticking around to the end of the video, and remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon, that way you can be notified every time I post a video because that'll help me out tremendously. I'm the Senator, and as always, have a good one.